Now to the future of the Republican Party, and in Chicago, their efforts to rebuild on the Northwest side. Indeed, there were more neighborhoods leaning red up Northwest and far Southwest during the last presidential election. And in the center of it all was a debate over an affordable housing development. Joining us, WIND AM 560 radio host Dan Proft and the Republican nominee for state representative in the 19th District and a Chicago police sergeant, Ammie Kessem. Dan, are you serious? You're going to rebuild the Republican Party in Chicago?
Well, I mean, look, I think one of the many mistakes the Illinois Republican Party has made in my lifetime is pretending that this little 3 million person hamlet by the lake is something that can be ignored. We have to have candidates who deliver the message, the value proposition of the Republican Party, I would say the conservative reform movement more so than the Republican Party in its current state. And so the only way to do that is to build infrastructure, and that means supporting candidates and supporting activists that support candidates to compete for seats in places like the northwest side of the city, the south side of the city, where the city center, where there is a contest to be had. So,
Ammie, you're a Chicago police sergeant. Why are you running? Why are you running as a Republican?
Sure. Well, first, let me just start out. I grew up on the southwest side of the city.
What neighborhood?
In the Mount Greenwood neighborhood. When I turned 18, obviously the precinct captain came, knocked on my parents' door and said, okay, we're going to register as a Democrat. So for most of my life, I was, you know, a lifelong Democrat. As I got older, I became more successful. I started looking at issues, and I realized that I tend to fall more on the right than I do on the left.
All right, now Mount Greenwood, Donald Trump, that's the neighborhood, the one neighborhood Donald Trump actually carried in the election. In some of those precincts, he got over 60, near 70% of the vote. The feeling is a lot of police officers voted for Donald Trump. Beyond that, blue pride and blue lives matter, that sense that the police are feeling mistreated and aggrieved. How do you appeal to other folks?
Well, I did grow up in a blue-collar family. My father worked for the phone company. My mom was mostly a stay-at-home mom most of my life. So I feel like I can really connect with that area of the city and people who are blue-collar, union. I am pro-union, which kind of goes against the grain of what people normally think about Republicans. But I feel like I can really connect with those who are not only like-minded and have conservative values.
What's like-minded? What conservative values?
One of the issues that has been brought up is this issue with the 5150 building in my neighborhood. And
okay, for those who don't know what that is, it was going to be 100 units. And it was going to have subsidized housing in there. And your critics say that you're playing hard with this, racial dog whistles.
I do take extreme offense to that. I've dedicated almost 20 years of my life to serving this city, and I've worked in areas that are extremely diverse. I pushed a beat car in the Uptown neighborhood for 13 years, and I've dedicated my life to the citizens of this city. So when someone says something like that about me, I take great offense to it.
So are there any circumstances that you'd support subsidized housing on the northwest side?
There is definitely a need for low-income housing, and certainly in the Jefferson Park neighborhood. The issue here is that a lot of the people who live in the Jefferson Park neighborhood live there because they enjoy the suburban feel of the neighborhood. A lot of city workers, blue-collar workers live in that neighborhood because they enjoy that type of lifestyle. It's mostly made up of single-family homes. Our alderman there has pushed an agenda and has a vision that the community...
It's Alderman Arena.
Yes, the community, we've seen 6,500 people signed a petition saying that they do not want density in this area. It's an area that's made up of mostly single-family homes.
How do you organize where, in parts of Chicago where this particular housing fight is not taking place? How do you rebuild the party in Chicago in the era of Donald Trump and Bruce Rauner?
Well, look, I don't think you build it around cult of personality. I think you build it around the economic interests and cultural values, as Ammie was addressing, of the residents. Cultural values that are being ridiculed by the political ruling class of both parties in this state, and the economic interests that are being undermined by both parties in this state. I think to some extent, until the Republican Party at the statewide level, at the leadership level, decides who it's going to be and who it's going to try and represent, I think you have to have individual candidates that are making an appeal directly to the values and economic security interests of the constituents they aim to serve.
So you helped to shape the message, Dan, for
Yes.
Jeannie Ives running in the primary against Rauner. So when you talk about the economic interests, you're talking taxes? So is there going to be a Republican candidate for mayor? Of course, it's a nonpartisan campaign,
Right.
but do you envision a Republican candidate running?
I don't think so at this juncture. I hope I'm wrong. I hope somebody who's a talented, successful person and has the ability to run and be a full-time candidate does step forward. But it's probably not, because the Republican Party has become a legal fiction in this state. The Jeannie Ives campaign is a classic example of this, though. You need a revolt against the ruling class. You need it in the city, you need it in the suburbs, you need it at the State House. We have got to revolt against people who think that public office is their birthright and their personal fiefdom. That's the candidates that I'm looking to support, people that are going to take the fight to the established order in City Hall and in Chicago. And in Springfield.
How many wards might there be a Republican running?
I think you
for alderman next year.
I think you could see half a dozen, 6 to 8 wards where you could have a center-right candidate, doesn't have to identify as a Republican, center-right candidate in terms of policy views, run competitive races.
But here's the fight. So you're a police officer. Mm-hmm. The police pension fund is way underfunded. Mm. Now, you're not going to support, which some of Dan's allies in the past have proposed, cutting public employee pensions in order to save taxpayers from these huge tax increases. You're not going to buy that.
It's a huge problem right now, and obviously...
So how do we square that circle?
Well, a lot of people are trying to ignore it, and we can't ignore it. It's not going to go away, so it has to be addressed.
So Rahm has raised taxes in order to make those pension payments.
My issue is that there are other ways that we can address this issue.
I'm all ears.
Sure. I haven't heard anyone speak about the casino that was written into that bill. We haven't heard anything about that. That would be one way. This new gambling law that they're going to be passing.
Sports gambling,
yeah,
that we talked about.
That's another revenue
Marijuana.
source. I think, personally, I think that ship has sailed. I said so.
But every single one of those things, the marijuana, the sports gaming, the casino, that's all been spent 12 ways already. The
Correct.
teachers union, the police and fire union,
right.
Tony Preckwinkle has already spent that money. Bruce Rauner has spent that money.
I mean, look, we're still paying for groceries we bought in 1986. I mean, so the idea that $150, $200 million from sports books is going to change the trajectory of the city or state, it's not. You have got to restructure systems we know we can't finance, and that includes the pension systems. But I'm not talking...
Cut pensions?
I'm not talking about not keeping promises that were made to people who've held up their end. Never, nobody has said that. Nobody has said that. Not in the Republican Party, not conservatives like me. Don't keep your promise to somebody. We're saying on a go-forward basis, there has to be a new deal cut. But you have got to bring public sector union leadership to the table to behave a little bit more like their private sector union counterparts, where they have actually changed their pension funds, altered the multipliers when times were bad, so that they could fully fund the promises they're making to their members if you're an operator, engineer, or a carpenter, or an electrician. There's no...
All right, Dan Proft, Ammie Kessem, thanks for coming in. When we come back, more than thanking a vet for his or her service this weekend, let's remember what Memorial Day was originally about, the vets who didn't make it back alive.